Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Irish Goodbye podcast. As you know, the Irish Goodbye podcast is about speaking to people who are going through and crushing their careers. We're not necessarily speaking to the C-suite. We're not speaking to keynote speakers, speaking to real people in real jobs with real success. Now, today, I'm very lucky to be joined by Murray Grubb Jr., who I've worked with at Oracle and now work with at Salesforce. And Murray, we've known each other a very long time across two continents. And please introduce yourself to everybody.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Murray. I am one of the sales team in the public sector division of the UK element of Salesforce. So I work for MuleSoft, our integration business. But for my sins, I've spent nearly 30 years in and around what is now called digital transformation or customer experience. And the majority of that time has been in heavily regulated industries like government and defense.
Heavily regulated is right. I mean, there's not many people I know have, one, enjoyed public sector, or two, succeeded in it. So kudos to you on both of those. Yeah. So before we get into the questions, do you want to give us a brief kind of review of your career, how you got to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in one of the new towns in Fife in Scotland. And in the early 80s, the Scottish accent was deemed the most trustworthy on the phone. So all of a sudden, all the call centers for all the banks and the Sky TV and so on, they all set up in and around where I'm from. And so, like most people, I ended up working in a call center. Little did I know that working in the call center for a bank would end up moving me into field sales, relocating to London, and then my career kind of taken off from there. But yeah, it all came from the humble beginnings of working in a call center and answering the most mundane questions and trying to upsell people on packages or banking products and everything that kind of goes with that. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember I was living in Ireland when all of a sudden every call center you were getting through to was in Scotland. Yeah. We loved it because we didn't have to speak to the English, but So listen, that kind of brings us into our first question here. Like you said, you'd like grown up in Fife and you went into a contact center. Now you're working at Salesforce. What's the job along the way that people probably wouldn't believe or wouldn't understand that has entered into the mix, and what has that given you?
I've had a lot of different jobs over the years, and in my youth in particular, I did all sorts of things. I mean, at one point in time, I worked backstage at a concert venue. So think of a roadie, but instead of being on the road, it was at one venue, so setting up for bands and so on. And then, you kind of progress from that in what would now be called the gig economy, where you're working 3 or 4 jobs at once, trying to make up your hours to sort of full-time income. And then as an adult, I've stacked shelves in B&Q, which is the UK version of sort of a Home Depot or a Lowe's. And then I've even ended up as a politician. So I did 2 terms as a local government councillor. And so a lot of different experiences, a lot of varied encounters that have kind of all come together and shaped me into the sort of individual I've become.
All right, let me pull on that thread a little bit, because I knew you'd been in politics. So
yeah,
do you think working in politics and having to appease more than one entity at any one time, because politics is populist, right? So has that helped you in your career in terms of learning how to let one sheet go while you're pulling another in?
Yes. I mean, politics is a really interesting place to be, right? Firstly, whenever you work in any big company, most of the time people say, oh, it's really political. And when you actually work in politics, you realize it's very tribal. And really what you kind of start to get to the bottom of, almost everyone that's in politics at least starts out trying to do the right thing. And it's only when you're actually there doing it that you suddenly realize how little power a lot of politicians actually have. It's good intent meets effort and then persuasion, because you've got to try and get everyone to join your way of thinking, or at least half plus one in the UK, which is not always easy. And it does mean that you often have to try and find a middle ground. So nobody loses, but conversely, nobody really wins. You kind of always have to find this middle ground that moves society forward or moves an organization forward, but you are often limited by how far you can push things because you've got to bring everybody with you. So yeah, politics at large, it teaches you to have to make your message broader than you would choose to if you were having a one-on-one conversation, and always try and find the collective growth that comes from it.
Okay, that's cool. And how would you say that's translated positively into a sales career?
Well, firstly, it got rid of half my friends when I joined one of the parties. Yeah, it saves you some time in that way. But now what it did, I mean, I look after public sector, right? I look after the UK government, and the UK government, you've got really three arms to it. You've got the two main political parties, to sort of the centre left and the centre right, and then you've got the civil servants, the people that actually work for the government. And you need everybody to kind of align. So whoever is in power from a political standpoint, they put forward their stance of what they want, but it's ultimately the civil servants that make things happen. And so for me, having been a politician and being on the other side of the fence, when I now go into my meetings, I always try and work out how they would have to create the business case. What is in it for them? What would be the impact if they don't do anything? What would be the impact if they do something but they don't go far enough? And then try and always tie it back to a political opinion, because ultimately, great intention, if you can't get somebody to sign it off, is just great intention. You've got to learn how to get things through. And that's probably the best experience I got from having been involved in politics at the coalface.
I love that. I love that. And kind of brings through to the next question. So having stacked shelves, worked at a call center, crushing it in IT sales, being a politician, is there a particular mindset that's been consistent throughout that you've leaned on in good times and bad that got you through?
Positivity is kind of the real kind of thing that I've always had to just take. You know, it's my kind of mantra, if you like, is don't allow negativity into your positive world. I smile all the time. I'm always positive. When I walk in a room, I try and bring energy and bring warmth into it. And I try and find the best in every situation. But I suppose like everyone, right? I've had tough times. We've all had tough times. But I always seem to believe that it will improve or it'll be okay. And that unstoppable belief that everything's going to be great, and then looking for that greatness to actually happen, that I guess is my superpower, that just unwavering positivity that it will happen.
I love that you say that, because it's a common thread to quite a few of these interviews. And I'm going to ask something that might seem a little off the chart here, but do you think having moved from Fife down to London helped with that? And the reason I'll ask is, I know it did with me. I know it did with Seb, who was in the previous interview, and Brian, who was on a previous interview, talking about once you move from your hometown, the safety net's gone. So you can't be negative anymore. You can't go, oh, this is shit, and then, you know, go back and sleep on your mom's couch, because if you're not positive and you don't make money, you don't make rent and you're homeless, right? So
Yeah.
do you think broadening your geographical horizons has helped your mental horizon?
Massively. Yeah, massively. What I found in my own life, anywhere I go, anyone I meet, if they live where they are from, they normally see the negatives and the weaknesses of where they are, typically because it wasn't their decision to be there. It was their parents or their grandparents or even their great-grandparents who chose to be in a certain area. However, anybody who leaves, if they then choose to come back, they suddenly become incredibly appreciative of all the greatness that's in their area, because it's now their choice. So for me, I left an area that had mass unemployment, huge social issues, and I moved to London, where if everything was possible, everything was available. You saw the trappings of wealth and intense poverty next to each other, and I knew which side of the road I'd rather be on. And so, you know, you all of a sudden you can really see that if you're successful, what's available. If you're interested in something, it's available. And I think anybody who's left the kind of small town world, the safety net of family, the safety net of friends, the echo chamber of acceptance, then you have to realize that I might not be right, or people might not like me or my what I was saying or doing as I was back home, because you don't have childhood loyalty anymore. You don't have family loyalty. You've got to suddenly be the type of person that other people want to be around. And
you have to earn your acceptance on merit.
Yeah, absolutely. You've either got to be more fun, more adventurous, or just work harder, but you have to reinvent yourself. But more importantly, it allows you to reinvent yourself. It allows you, you can shed the skin of your old self and you can reinvent yourself into the person
100%.
you want to be. And I think for me anyway, moving south was the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
I love there's two things you said there. One is the positivity. And again, I couldn't agree more. I say to everybody I mentor, you are the sum of the 5 closest people to you. If 2 of those are negative, you're going to be negative 40% of the time. Right. And surround yourself with positivity. It doesn't mean you have to cut people off, but just don't have them as the closest circle to you. Yeah. But the echo chamber of acceptance. I love that phrase. That's I'm going to steal that. Just going to be honest with you.
Robert, you can keep that. That's a Murrayism just for you.
I appreciate it, pal. So look, we've talked about the positivity, and we've talking about the your mindset and your grit and what's God kind of made you leave Fife and come and be in the position you're in now. But what's one mistake that you made along the way that taught you more than any degree or MBA could have?
Well, look, mistakes are something that we all make. Some intentional, some just circumstantial. But for me, I would say my mistake was trusting everyone by default. That, when you're in sales, right, you just naturally try and get on with people. You adapt, you become a human chameleon, because it's not even about ego. It is about that acceptance. It's about getting on with people and being around them. So typically what ends up happening is you believe what you're told. If you meet somebody for the first time and they tell you all this great stuff about them and what they do and how they can do it and all that kind of stuff, you believe them because you think, well, why would they lie? So you trust everyone. But you also, therefore, if somebody gives you an opinion about somebody else, you may also trust that. So you're incredibly susceptible to other people shaping your own view of the world in which you find yourself. And it's only when you really take a step back and you understand that people maybe have to earn your trust. You can be really friendly, you can be open, you can be warm, you can do all that sort of stuff. But you have to take everything that is said to you with a pinch of salt up front. And I think that kind of goes for your, professional life, but the personal life too. I mean, I've met people who I've just trusted right from the start, straight from the off, and they have a spectacular ability to make me regret ever doing that. And it's amazing how it happens to you a couple of times. You can think, I'm not going to trust anyone, and everyone's got to earn my trust. And then you become the problem as well, because that's where the negativity creeps in. So you have to find this happy path where you can be really accepting and trusting of people, but not just give blind trust on faith.
I love that. And I'm in absolute agreement with you, nearly violent agreement with you here. But the better I've become at sales, the better I've become at not necessarily spotting that, because that's, as you said, people are chameleons. We're all chameleons too, but especially in sales, you have to mirror. You have to you realize Murray might be gregarious and he likes this sort of engagement, but somebody else might be more quiet. They like to be spoken to in a more one-to-one capacity and softer, and you draw the information out of them, and you learn that in sales. But what getting better at my job has taught me, personally and professionally, is triangulate information. And what you said there is, somebody tells you something about somebody else that they don't like them. That's not enough. You have to meet them. You have to know somebody else who knows them. You have to, once you can have more than one data source, you get a much better view on anything, not just professional.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The triangulation of thought, that is totally the way forward.
Fantastic. So the mindset that got you through all of these aspects, not trusting people too early and letting them earn that, the positivity that got you here, did you always have that? Or if you met yourself 20 years ago, what would be the difference between Murray of 20 years ago and Murray from now? And what would you say to you 20 years ago?
Well, that is the $1 million question, because in part, I wouldn't want to say something that would change what I've done, because I'm genuinely happy with where I've ended up in life. If my younger self could see me now, see what I do, where I live, the fact that I've done all these things, I've had all these experiences, but I still feel like the same person, I think they'd be absolutely amazed. I've completely surpassed my own expectations that I had for myself. But in terms of, I guess, to answer your question directly, let me give you an example. I was at a big event with work a few months ago. I qualified for a certain reward, and we were at an event, and there was the young people starting out in their sales career. There was the people in the middle of the career. There was the people at the end of their career. And you kind of saw people going into the zones. And as the night went on and people were getting more excited, and the drinks being flowing and so on, the music starts. We had this amazing saxophonist playing. There was dance music going on. It suddenly, the mindset starts going to, it's a night out. You're in a club. You're having a great time. And I could see the young people getting excited and going wild. And my initial instinct was to go in and be in the center of it and have a great time. And then the little voice in the back of my head said, no, they're the young ones. It's their time.
Yeah.
This is your time to observe. Just take a step back, and you don't have to be the center of attention. And it was the first time in my adult life that I heard the little voice that's normally my mother's voice telling me, no, you don't have to be the center. Just relax.
You can sit this one out, Murray.
Yeah, that's it. Just have another beer and relax. And that's exactly what I did. And I had fantastic conversations with the people around me. My girlfriend was with me. We had a great time. And it was really interesting, actually, because we were then able to talk about some of the things that we'd seen at the characters. And then everyone in that group was relating it back to how they used to be when we were the young ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think if my younger self could see where I've gotten to, they'd be blown away. But I certainly wouldn't try and change the journey.
I love that. That's because there's a lot I would try and change about mine. But ultimately, I am where I want to be. So, yeah, it's like if you go back in time and change it, where does it leave you next? But you mentioned something there.
Well, I'm a massive Back to the Future fan. So,
all right.
That's my favorite movie. And, as Doc Brown says, no man should know too much about his own future. So I guess that's kind of also been one of those little voice nuggets in the back of my head.
Yeah, it's pretty smart. But you did mention something about exceeding expectations, and I wanted to pull on that. I know we didn't discuss this before, but just a little bit about when I moved to Salesforce, I set a financial target, and I achieved it in my second year. And it wasn't a joyous occasion. It was actually quite lonely, because I'd set a position I didn't think I'd ever get to, and I achieved it.
Yeah.
I remember calling my father and it being quite hollow and going, so what do I do now? I can't just say I want to earn $1.5 million. It can't just be money. And my father said, well, you have to give back. If you're getting to a point where you set a target, then you have to give back. So surpassing expectations, how do you deal with that?
Well, I think in part it's because I used to set too low targets, too low expectations, because the initial mindset was it was about achieving all these little micro wins, and then you're still achieving, but you don't really stretch yourself with that. And then for me, I guess I was blessed that I had a lot of role models and things that I wanted to achieve, experiences that I got. And then you start thinking about more, and you kind of start thinking about how you can inspire your own children to kind of go on and achieve these things. So you've got to try and aim for greatness yourself, or you can't expect the next generation to. And The giving back is quite an interesting one. I've always been heavily involved in charity. I've always kind of done a lot of stuff to kind of give back. I'm a prominent Freemason where I live. I'm actively involved in Freemasonry. We've raised a lot of money for various charities that I've been directly and indirectly involved in. And there's an element now of the giving back part routinely feels better than the winning. Winning a deal, earning money, it's great, it's important, but it's great and important because what it allows you to do. Like you, I guess the wins aren't really the end goal for me now. I love the journey. I love the validation I get when I tell my dad I've won a deal or a big deal, because the deals I work on now, they're huge. I look after the biggest accounts going. I look after the government. So when I do a big deal, everyone I know and my family and so on, they get the benefits of those deals. If I move the taxation service on, if I move the passport service on, if I move anything on in government by allowing them to embrace the latest technology, everyone I know benefits from that because they actually get to use it. Whereas in other roles that I've had where I've been selling to the commercial world, shareholders benefit, the company benefits, their customers benefit, but most of the people I know wouldn't necessarily see what that benefit is because it's not impacting their world. So I think the giving back agenda is something that we really need to embrace, just as a society. Our company obviously push it. Salesforce are all about giving back. We have all the VTO time, voluntary time off, where you get to go and volunteer for any organizations, help out with any charities, do all that kind of giving back. And that is I think it has to be more about just doing it because you're allowed to do it. I think you've actually got to want to do it. And when you start doing that, the value it brings to you as an individual, I think, really just changes your outlook. And it's certainly what gives me the most joy now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm involved in a dog charity. I'm the CFO of a dog charity. I adore it. I travel so much with work that it'd be unfair of me to have a dog. So I get my canine adoration by going to the ranch and playing with the dogs. But it's actually something I meant to bring up when you said if you met yourself from 20 years ago. If I met myself 20 years ago, okay, have more dogs.
Yeah, I'm a massive dog guy. I have a blue Staffordshire Bull Terrier, like a really small pit bull to the American audience. And, she's called Bonnie because A, she's blue, and B, because she's from Scotland.
Right.
And, so, the Bonnie Scotland bit. And it doesn't matter how good or bad my day has been. When my dog is next to me, it feels better. And so obviously the work you do with the dog shelter and so on, I follow and share every post because anything to do with dogs always gets my support.
Absolutely.
In fact, my girlfriend works in tech as well, and she was at an event in Denver a few weeks ago, and there was a American charity similar to the Dogs Trust that this tech company had changed all of their systems. And they had them at this event telling the story of how they improved the systems. And they had these puppies that were available for adoption on their stand. And I thought that was the greatest marketing I'd ever heard of, because I would spend all day at that stand listening to every pitch just so I could hold one of those puppies. So, yeah.
So I worked for a brief period for a company called Walk Me. Lovely company. They were born out of Israel, but I worked for them in New York. But they used to allow you to bring your dogs to work. We had an office on Park Avenue, and IHG, which was a customer of mine at the time, they were notorious for never coming to your offices. You always had to go to them, and it was always very buttoned up and very serious.
Yeah.
And I was dealing with the head of KYC and KY3P. For those that's know your customer, know your third party. And we were trying to pitch her on this platform, and she's doing the usual, we'll come to our office, do this, do that. And I said, or you can come to our office where we've got 3 Labradors and a couple of golden doodles. They immediately sat in our office for the entire afternoon, gave the demo with like a land slug, a big Labrador up across her lap while she petted somebody else's Labrador for the entire demo.
Perfect. They
Yeah,
would never be more focused or be having a more memorable meeting than
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So come here, is there any lessons that you've learned the hard way? I know you said about trusting people, but that's more a mindset. Is there anything, any particular moments that's happened in your career that you thought, shit, that's taught me now not to do that again? But you could, had you seen somebody else go through it or read it in a book, it wouldn't have had the same impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always lessons you can learn, right? And it's much better to learn the lesson from somebody else's mistakes or fallout than from yourself. But I think that COVID and the post-COVID world changed culture, changed working norms, changed so much. The biggest thing I've learned the hard way is that family should come first. I've always prioritized work. You know, in my youth, I was a real workaholic. My work ethic was always kind of second to none. I was always the first one in, the last one to leave. You know, I might not be able to outsmart you, but I'll outwork you. That kind of whole mantra about just really pushing all the time to kind of move on. But I had 2 young children when the chaos of lockdown happened, and I didn't adapt my lifestyle to that changing way. I still tried to work all the time, and you know, probably then more than ever, because everyone was so worried about losing their jobs, and so you had to be better than the next guy, and you know, put in more effort, and a lot of that kind of stuff. It, you know, really through the lens of reflection, probably wasn't my finest hour, and that ultimately led to my family breakdown. Ended up, you know, with divorce and so on. And I think the chaos for all involved is something that I wished I could have avoided. And I see whenever anybody else goes on that path, it can do irreparable damage to everyone. So, you know, keeping a real strong focus on your family life, you know, for the immediate family, but also your extended family and your friends too. Really just don't become too busy being busy. Learning to just take time to recharge, take time off, actually use your holidays. I mean, I never used my holidays. You know, you get 4 or 5 weeks a year, which, you know, I know a lot of the American companies, they get 2 weeks. Here we get 4 or 5, and I still only took 1 or 2 weeks because it was just that pushing all the time. So learning to take time to recharge so that you come back stronger, you come back energized. Learning to prioritize the people in your life that you need to really feel like you're winning, and to take a moment and realize that work is important. Don't ever think that it's not. But family and friends and outside interests are equally important in their own way. And I think that that's probably the lesson that I've learned the hard way, possibly learned too late, but will never need to learn again.
Okay. I appreciate you being as candid about it as you have been, because I agree that your why has to be bigger than your what.
Yeah.
And if you don't then prioritize them in the same way, you can't prioritize your family and then work all the time for them and neglect them.
Yeah.
You know, if they are the reason you're doing this, occasionally you have to lift your head and spend time with them and say, we're having this moment because I sacrificed 40 hours, not 80 hours.
100%. Absolutely 100%.
Absolutely. I love that. And that brings us into, if somebody's, we're going to come to the end of this shortly. It's been really enjoyable speaking with you. I love how candid and open you are. You're actually making me miss home, because the Scots and the Irish obviously are very akin to each other. But just the colloquialisms and the phraseology, we just don't get it here in the States. So if you were to speak with somebody who's following in your footsteps, what's a bit of advice you could give them that would hopefully make their road a little straighter than yours was?
Well, I think for me, I would say find a mentor and listen to them. I've been genuinely blessed with the greatest mentors throughout my life. You know, like your dad, Maurice, for me, my father has always been there to guide and inspire me. And then I had, I guess, my first mentor who wasn't my father was my friend's dad, Professor Ian Cameron. He was a guiding light in my early career as that kind of sounding board, and he was actually the pivotal voice in my decision to move to London, looking at perhaps leaving the life I had behind. Certain things you didn't necessarily want your parents' opinion. You wanted somebody who you respected, but who wasn't your parent. He was that voice for me, and he actually was the one that helped me see that if I didn't make the move south, I could live to regret it. Whereas if I did make the move south and I then chose to come back, then it was my choice. So that was a kind of really big part for me. Then I met, when I worked in the banking world, and I did move to London, I met a city gent by a guy by the name of Peter McDonald. He's been my mentor now for over 20 years. He was the first kind of city guy I knew who just had the black book, knew everyone in every industry, every company. He'd had some really big roles, lots of big accounts, but he was one of these guys. He was a fun guy. He had a lunch club that he ran every month, and he'd have all these different guest speakers, from politicians to industry leaders to corporate heads, and used to have the most in-depth conversations over this long lunch, a proper European style long lunch, lots of courses, lots of wine, just let it flow. And he's been there, as I say, since my early 20s. He's been there. He's been like a second father to me from out that whole time, and having somebody again who can guide you, who can listen to you, who can just help you. He's helped me get jobs. He's opened his network to me. That's been a tremendous value for me. I've then had, even now, my current manager, Chloe Hoggard. She's probably the most inspirational woman that I've ever met. And she's helped bring a different part to my own growth. She's helped me kind of get that to humanize my thought processes, really, to think about how actions and words are delivered to others, how they're then brought into others, how they receive them, and kind of allowed the space to understand empathy and emotions. Because before I was pretty direct, pretty emotionless, because I was always focused on the goal. But my kind of three main mentors and my father, all of them have helped shape me and move me on. And I think that without any one of them, my life would have gone in a very different direction. So I think ultimately, if I was saying to somebody how I could help them to try and not necessarily go my path, but go a similar path, or at least move forward, it's about having a mentor who allows you to learn from experience, and normally from somebody who's achieved so much that the reward for them is now giving back, seeing their mentee become successful. Every one of them thinks that's the biggest prize. So just like us giving back to charity, they're giving back by helping the next generation. So yeah, get a mentor, one that you trust and one you can listen to.
I couldn't agree more. And harping back to, in comedy, we call it a callback, something you said earlier, your mentor can't be an echo chamber of acceptance. They have to be willing to challenge you. They have to be willing to call you on your bullshit.
Yeah, 100%.
And you mentioned there about kind of later in your career getting a female boss who challenged you differently or made you think differently. Kristen Grueson's my AVP here at Salesforce. My career has bloomed under her because she's challenged me differently. I've always had male bosses for the most part, had male bosses up to this point. She just challenged me very differently. And having those different personalities at the right time in your career is pivotal.
It allows you to grow a different way.
Yeah.
It's you're not always getting the same people. You think about a football team. I know you're a big sport guy. Think about a football team. You've got 11 different individuals. The manager has to get the best out of every one. And if every one of them has the same skill set and the same approach, they lose, because 11 stars is not as good as 11 people who allow everyone else to shine. And that's what having these different voices, different viewpoints has allowed me to do. I've been able to shine at different times throughout my career because each of my mentors has brought something unique to my thought process.
And that's why hard work will beat talent every time.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, wasn't to say hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard?
Yes. I knew there was a second part of that I was missing. So look, We're about to wrap up here, but there's one thing I want to call out mentors on this, because this goes to the other side. You and I have kind of proved out that being in the part of the career that we want to be in, mentors are being so important here. But it seems the better my career gets, the more people want to mentor me. So I'm going to challenge mentors out there. Stop reaching out to people like me and Murray, who are, in our 40s and 50s and doing well in our career. It's the 25-year-olds that need the mentor. It's the 30-year-olds that need the mentor. When I was 25 and 30, I couldn't find a mentor for love nor money. The more successful I've got, they've crawled out of the woodwork and want to be my career coach. So that's my call out to mentors. Aim, give back, do better. So look, that's my preachy bit for this podcast. Don't worry.
The Reverend Carl in session.
So look, we're about to wrap this up, and the last question we always ask in the Irish Goodbye podcast is: as we get up from the bar and we leave these two stools for two people to come behind us, what's a bit of advice you'd write on the back of a beer napkin and leave it on the bar for the two people about to sit down where we were?
This is a great question, and obviously I've watched a lot of your Irish Goodbyes now, and I really tried to think about this, because I thought, do I want to leave something that's a really inspirational quote? Do I want to leave something that's I kept coming back to this one thought process, and that is, if the person that you are about to give advice to gave the exact same advice to your children, would you still give it? And if the answer is yes, give the advice. And if it's no, then it's not needed, and it's best to just keep it to yourself.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, look, on that note, Murray, thank you as always. You're a great man, good friend, and I wish you the continued success in your career. You've been crushing it to now. You've been very helpful to me throughout mine. So thank you very much for joining us here today, and wish you the very best.
Thanks for having me, Carl. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Cheers now. Bye-bye.